I was recently in South Africa, and then on the way back came via Belfast for a couple of days. And I brought back with me a polemic which I will burden you with for a few moments. Along the lines, the title is Drawing the Line, a New Constitution for Northern Ireland. The preamble of this constitution reads as follows. The trouble with you people is you don't know where to draw the line between lawful protest and unlawful assembly, between civil rights and lethal riots, the ballot and the bullet. Now there's a fine line for you. No one can say we haven't done our best to show you where to draw the line. We brought Judge Feetham back in 1920 all the way from white South Africa to tread his line through farmhouse kitchens, across village squares and car tracks, to show you people how a majority can be created democratically. It worked beautifully in the Bantustands, where artistic ink blots spattered all over the map herded those people back where they belong, assuming for the moment they belong at all. So those who understand the business of government and the government of business could get on with it. It worked beautifully until those interfering, outside agitating United Nations sanctions imposing aliens went and stirred up our blacks. See what you people have done. You've caused a bloodbath. And it worked beautifully in Stormont. They were masters of the government business until the press and the television stirred up the negligible minority with pictures of Selma, Montgomery, Martin Luther King, Protestant by name but Fenian in every word indeed, and you started a bloodbath. We tried to show you people where to draw the line from partition to power sharing, diploc courts to direct rule, internment and interrogation, CS gas and plastic bullets, supergrasses, strip searches, shoot to kill, collusion. But would you listen? No. You preferred a bloodbath, it seems. Now, therefore, we are giving you a new constitution, so none of you can say you didn't understand the line or the penalty for crossing it. The second section is entitled Freedom, Justice and Equality. You shall have no right to speak, you shall have no right to silence. There shall be freedom of the press for the official views on violence. There shall be freedom of assembly every bloody Sunday and segregated education every bloody Monday. Freedom of religion's full enjoyment shall guarantee your rights to unemployment. There shall be freedom of association just as long as we decide the groups to which you may belong. The rights to cavity search and nervous seizure shall be the RUCs to exercise at leisure. The right of privacy shall now be known as the right of all the forces of the Crown to be free from all investigations into shoot to kill and other allegations. No lawyer shall interfere with the arrest of those we say are terrorists. The right to counsel is hereby cancelled. And it shall be the duty of the accused to prove that he's been tortured, not abused. Her silence will proclaim her guilt as well as if she signs a false confession in her cell. All serious offences shall be triable by judges, juries being unreliable. There shall not be excessive bail. In fact, there will be no bail at all. Our goal is to put one and all in jail so they should get accustomed to walls. Equality before the law is fine for some, but not for women, children, or the homeless, jobless, worthless, poor, and those beyond the very pale of law, uncouthly known as Fenian scum. In conclusion, this is the line that divides division against itself. It is the colour line in the water. It is the boundary line of your inheritance. It is the lifeline of fire that you cross at your peril. It is the line that draws you until the day you draw the line. And I hate going to those meetings where the moderator stands up and says, the next person needs no introduction. But she doesn't, and we love her.
you very much. We shouldn't do things like that and then wonder where elitism comes from. It's a privilege for me actually to be part of this panel. We all, as it were, work our own side of the street and fight our own corner. And it is the cross-fertilisation of ideas and the meeting with other people and the privilege of being able to draw on the experience, to draw on the principle, to draw on the long haul of such eminent people as Derek Bell, to share the struggle of people like Anne and our friend here who fight on the very margins, and to meet old friends like Richard and that man at the end there. I tell you, the State Department were not glad that he got stay in, but why we were delighted. As they say in Belfast, you didn't get arrested for nothing. From listening to other people on the platform, I think that individually we all know, although collectively we tend to forget, people do not by and large start to fight oppression because of the greater noble motive. I, in fact, never in my whole life have I ever met anybody who, from a position of absolute comfort and equality, made an intellectual decision to throw it all into the melting pot to fight against oppression. I keep hoping someday I will, but I actually never have. I started fighting against oppression for no great love of humanity. Wasn't any great vision of a beautiful world that led me to fight against oppression. It was suffocating me. I couldn't survive. I was actually at the start looking only to make elbow room for me. I needed elbow room because if I didn't get elbow room, I was going to go under. I think almost everybody I know started from the same position. People start to fight against oppression because they are oppressed. And people at that stage of fighting against oppression have a very limited view of what freedom is. And essentially they see it in very finite and very personal terms. So when I was a young student in Belfast, freedom to me was equality of voting rights, a right to vote. I didn't know, in fact, at that time that people in this country couldn't be bothered getting out of their beds in the morning to vote. I still don't understand it. It still mesmerises me that in this city, people will not bother to vote in the mayoral election. And then they'll whinge for the next year, 2 years, 3 years, or however long you might be stuck with somebody you don't like and wonder how it happened. And how people can forget. There are people in the city from everywhere, and you forget that people died for the right to vote. Nothing more revolutionary, nothing more demanding, nothing more world-shattering than the right to go out and vote. And in my country, people still die for that. And in South Africa, people still die for that. And when we talk about the path towards freedom, I have difficulty understanding how we can still be dying for it, and those who got it before us have disposed of it. For no reason other than they couldn't be arsed getting out of bed in the morning to go and vote. So those of you who are of that mentality had better get your names on the linking sheet before it's too late. And I don't wish to be It's a transformation that takes place within us because we have conceptions of society that get shattered as you go along the road. For me, they were fairly simple. I mean, I started out from my own sort of Catholic nationalist, fairly protected in that I went to grammar school and went to university, fairly protected background on a very moralist basis. You know, and I look back and see myself 20 years ago, I was a regular pain in the ass. I still am. But to me, it was very simple. There was a right and there was a wrong, and I was in the right. And there were things that should be the way they should be, and the reason they weren't that was that people who were running the country didn't know that things were wrong. And if people like myself just got out there into the street in sufficient numbers and made enough noise, they would see they were wrong and they would put them right. And it's surprising how many of us start off in that very simple position, because we know we're hurting, we know we're not getting a fair shake, we know we are oppressed, but we haven't yet figured out the whole story of oppression. We haven't made the connections, we haven't made the links, and we haven't even noticed who else is oppressed, unless they have the same particular form of oppression as ourselves. And so I started out in the civil rights movement in the north of Ireland. My historic point of reference was, of course, the whole history of Ireland. But when we were young in the civil rights days, old people used to tell us that it would all come to war. I remember those days. I remember the People's Democracy elections, February 1969, up and down South Derry, when people said, you had better be able to finish what you have started. And we went, oh, old man, what would you know? Ha old woman, you don't know anything. These are new days. We have a new plan. We're going to look civil rights and democracy. No old nationalist nonsense for us. And old people used to say to us, it doesn't matter where it starts. It can start with the land question, it can start with unemployment, it can start with voting rights, it can start whatever you want to start it with, Bernadette. It will end with the national question. It will end with the right to self-determination. It will end with getting the British out of Ireland. It will end in war. They're right. And as Anne said, we learn as we go along. The thing I learned the hard way was never to undervalue the experience of the generation that went before you.
That's right.
I would like that. It's also easier for me to understand that now because I am the generation. I think once you start demanding equality, once you start demanding to come in out of the cold, demanding an end to bias and discrimination, you begin to see that the system you want to join doesn't work anyway. And that was our experience. We were lawful and democratic. We used civil disobedience. Our first point outside of our own country was in fact the black civil rights movement here. If one compares particularly the student movement in the north of Ireland, where Michael Farrell was the main organiser, one can see the Belfast Derry March, for example, was quite deliberately modelled on the Selma March. That the conscious effort of the political leaders within the student movement were making the connections between the black civil rights movement here and the civil rights movement in Ireland. It was therefore a major trauma, the first major trauma of my life, apart from sitting down in the middle of Shaftesbury Square waiting for hell to freeze over. Michael Farrell said, we will sit here until we get to the City Hall or until hell freezes over. Half an hour later, Michael Farrell said, we will get up and go home. I have the greatest respect for Michael, but I've never really forgiven him for letting hell to freeze over in 30 minutes. Apart from that, my next major trauma was coming to America in 1969. By sight 1969, as Sean Mackin has said, we had moved very rapidly from demanding civil rights because of the reaction of the state. The position had moved very, very rapidly to violent conflict. And the violence was initiated by the state. It was initiated by the police, and then under the leadership of the police and the B specials, it was followed up by the right-wing political supporters of the state, the loyalists. And it has become confused in the issue of Protestant and Catholic, but basically the whole question is one of identity with the state, or whether or not you believe in the right of the state to exist. We were not aware of that consciously at the time, but the old generation was right, and that's what it came to. When I came to this country first, I came straight from the barricades of Derry. I wasn't aware at the time, but the reason I was sent here was to get me out of there. There's a source of annoyance there as well. And I was shipped off while more moderate people counseled the peace when the British Army arrived. So I arrived here to do God's work and free Ireland. An experience never to be forgotten. I arrived here in New York and I met Mayor Lindsay. Very few people here probably remember this. I was first introduced to American political etiquette. They all got china cups and saucers, and the pressmen took photographs of us all having tea. We were all drinking Jameson. I was unaware of the subtleties of American politics, and a reporter said, meaning, I don't know what he meant, were you drinking tea or coffee? He said, what are you drinking? And I said, Jameson, but I've never had it in a cup and saucer. This was not on my part a statement of political honesty. This was not on my part, although many Americans confuse it as such, the cutting edge across the hypocrisy of America. This was because I didn't know that you weren't supposed to say what was in the cup. This was innocence on my part. I was 21 years old. I didn't even know where I was. The man gave me the keys to the city of New York. I didn't need the freedom of the city. I didn't live here. I didn't even like the look of the city. I had never been in a place as big in my life, as dirty in my life, and you couldn't see the sky without going. So this city I did not need to be in. But I was aware that there were people in the city who could use the freedom of the city. They were citizens of the city, they were citizens of the state, they were citizens of the United States of America, and they seemed to be very short on freedom. And because I was young and aggressive and into the cutting edge of the barricades, I was looking for my own young counterparts in this city. And they seemed to me to be black. And they seemed to me at that time to be the Black Panther Party. So I gave them the keys to the city. And there's a big limousine, and I was put into it, and I said, where are we going now? And he said, we have a mayoral reception at City Hall. And just as we're driving along the road, the penny dropped. Chicago, mayoral reception at City Hall. The mayor of this city is Mayor Devlin. We used to call the chief of police in 1969, Ross McGimpsey, the chief of police in Derry, we called him Mayor Daly for a nickname. Called him Mayor Daly because he went around beating people up all the time. And we had seen this other Mayor Daly on television do it. I knew it had to do with the Democratic Convention, and I knew it had to do with the anti-war movement, but I really wasn't into the and our Mayor Daly was the Chief of Police. But my instincts were sound enough. I knew that I didn't know these people, but I did have to go home. When this party was over, I was going to have to get back on the E105 and back into Derry City, and if people knew that I had been sitting filling my face with the real Mayor Daly, I was finished. No way was I going home to say yes, who I had dinner with yesterday. So, just on that basis of self-preservation, I wouldn't get out of the car. And they came down and they begged and they pleaded and they cajoled and they threatened, and out of the car I could not get myself. So I never got to meet Mayor Daly. And Mayor Daly never got to meet me. And I never to this day got invited back to Chicago by any major Irish-American organisation in that city. But it was all part, if you like, of the path towards freedom. Totally unaware of the havoc I was causing, I continued to make my way to the West Coast. I met Louis P. Newton there, which was a great privilege for me at the time. I went to prison to meet Angela Davis, and I was on Alcatraz. I was having fun. I was learning what oppression was. It wasn't an intellectual journey for me. I came to this country that I knew nothing about. When I looked for my own people, they weren't white. I realised that I was Irish. In fact, I never actually considered what colour I was till I got here. I knew I was Irish, and when I came here, the people I understood, the people who understood me, the people whose life experience was the same as mine, were not white. They were black, they were Puerto Rican, they were Native American, they were welfare women. The one group that I could not relate to in 1969 was the American feminist movement. It took me a number of years before I got that one right. And the reason, actually, I still blame the American feminist movement. Every American bourgeois feminist that I met had a large flat, a tame dog, and a tamer husband. I wonder where on earth they got them. And they all went down into the community. And I just wondered, what community did they come from? Why did they go down into some other community? Why did they not stay in the community they were in? Then I realised they didn't have a community. Just a large flat, a tame dog, and a tame husband. And that's maybe not very fair to say that, because there were major issues being fought, but I didn't relate to them. I was oppressed as a nationalist, as a person from the working class, as a Catholic, and it was as much oppression as I could handle for one learning experience. And I could relate to the Welfare Women's Association, various groups I've met across the state. I could relate to women in the black community, to women in the Puerto Rican community. I just had difficulty dealing with all these other people. And my first reaction, which was caused with bad vibrations, we got over them, as we all learned, or some would say. My first reaction to the breadth of the Irish-American community here was that some of them reminded me of Orangemen. I just couldn't get away from this comparison. Orangemen are unionists, loyalists in the north of Ireland. They say things like, there's nothing wrong with this country. Catholics don't want to work. They just want to stay home, live on the welfare, and have children so that everybody else will keep them. And I used to hear people say that, people who supported me, people who were saying they were coming to hear me speak. And then when I'd ask them why were they upset about my attitude to other groups, they'd say, Bernadette, you don't understand. They actually said to me, "Will I tell you, Bernadette, just stay out of American politics, you don't understand them. These panthers, they're trying to overthrow the state by violent means." I can see how Americans don't like it, but what's your problem with it? Is that not, was that not your game? Is that not what you think should be done in Ireland? battle against oppression and on the way to freedom, you have to make choices. There's a certain level where on the road to freedom, you become responsible for yourself. You have to get up in the morning, because the alternative is lying in your bed. And if you lie in your bed, the roof will come in around you. At least if you're up, you have a chance of getting out of the house before it falls. So you have to get out of your bed in the morning. You also have got to make friends. As Anne says, you have to organise. The long, sad story of 700 years of oppression in Ireland, the journey from slavery to equality for the black movement, cannot just be told and told and told so that we can be good or bad about it. If we want to change it, we have to organise. There are none of us strong enough to organise on our own. And we have to take responsibility for the choices we make, for who our allies are, in order to defeat oppression. And in doing that, we define how we understand it. Because there are all kinds of oppressions. And the decisions we make in crises are the most important decisions of all. People who say, I have no politics, that is the most political statement I ever heard in my life. The person who says they have none. Because they do things, make decisions. They think they're not on the basis of politics, but the decisions they make, much more loudly than the words they use, the decisions they make, the actions they take, define and determine their politics for them. And that's the position we're all in on the road to freedom. We move from struggling against that which oppresses us individually. We gather around us all of those who are oppressed in the same manner we are, and we begin to move forward. As we do, we learn the strength of the oppressor. We learn what the law is for. We learn what the police is for. We learn what the structures of the state are for. They are not there. They are not there in the present society to arbitrate between groups of equal people, between groups of equal dissidence or difference. They are there to ensure that those who put them there remain on the top of the pile. There is in everybody's struggle, whether you start, as I say, from my point of view in Ireland, whether you start from Anne's point of view in Ireland and carry your struggle here, doesn't matter where you start. There comes a point in your own struggle where you have to make a qualitative decision what the name of your game is. You are either on a struggle to get to the top of the heap, or you are on the basis of a struggle to change the system, which puts some people on the top and some people on the bottom. And that determines how you struggle from certain points out. That determines whether in this country, when you're fighting for human rights, you include the human rights of the people in Ireland, along with those in Central America, along with those in the black movement, human rights for gays and lesbians. You have to move from a position of supporting only the rights of people who share your own opinions, your own preformed prejudice, your own attitudes based on your own environment, to determining whether you agree and support the human rights of other oppressed people whom you are prejudiced against because of your own education and life experience system. And that's when you know you are truly on the road to freedom. The other way, you're just on an endless cycle, deluding yourself that there's room at the top for you. And you start to make your alliances with presidential candidates. And you start to make your alliances with a man who might be chief of police. And you start to look for the people with clout. It's a great one in Ireland. The people with clout. They don't even know what people with clout are. People are with clout have money, favours to give, a bit of political prestige to lend. These are people with clout. Before they allow you to work along with them, you have to make certain concessions. You want to work along with people who have business interests. Well, then you don't want to be along with people who will talk about boycotting. Certainly not. Boycotts are not good for making alliances with people who sell. No. You cannot get a Coca-Cola scholarship and boycott at the same time. So then you say, well, maybe boycotting is out of fashion. Maybe what we ought to be into is educating our people so that we are ready to take these positions. Maybe we really ought to be into preparing our people for leadership. Maybe we should be getting our people into these schemes where they can go to the Harvard School of International Politics and they can learn how to be negotiators, how to compromise, and how to use words to mean things that words don't mean at all. Like democracy. John Hume went to the Harvard School of Gobbledygook. And John came home learning to say wonderful phrases which made him a statesman of international stature. He learned to say, nothing is agreed until everything is agreed. He learned to say, everything is on the table and nothing is off the table. He learned to say, the solution will be found in the totality of relationships between the people of these islands. And when somebody put their hands up and said, excuse me, John, what does that mean? John would say, don't be negative. But if you ask John, John's on the road to freedom. I have a number of fundamental principles, you see. I actually believe in democracy. I believe that democracy is the rule of the mob. That's what it actually means. I don't mean that people should just act like a mob, but it means that the people should decide. People can't decide if they don't know. So people have to learn, they have to be informed, and we have to have democracy. And indeed, at times, people have the right to be wrong. But there are some fundamental pillars of democracy that democracy won't function without. The people must have access to information. The people must have access to decisions. The people must have access to power and to the machinery of power. Otherwise, democracy doesn't work. You can't have democracy in secrecy. Not with the best will in the world. You cannot have democracy in secrecy. I, for example, did not struggle 25 years for a vote to see John Hume and Jerry Adams colloquial behind the door telling me that I'm not supposed to know what they're talking about because it's too sensitive. I didn't elect them to negotiate. It's a fundamental principle. I'm not saying I disagree with them. I'm saying get out here, lads, till I hear what you have to say. Because that's what democracy is about. Get out here and fight for it and argue it and win your argument or lose it out here amongst the people. Because that's democracy. Nobody said democracy was easy. There's another fundamental problem about what people call democracy. It presumes that everybody has an equal role to play. You can't have an equal role to play if you don't have equality in society. Democracy doesn't work if somebody owns a building and everybody else has to live in it. Democracy doesn't work if somebody owns a dinner pot and everybody else is starving. Because there is an economic basis to democracy, or democracy doesn't work. On these delusions, the majority of people in this country think they live in a democracy. God loves the way. They think that because you write down the Constitution on a piece of paper, because you've got a White House, because you've got a history, because you've got a Supreme Court, because you've got trial by jury, which we don't have, you've got a democracy. Wait till you see it falling apart, and you know what it is. In support of democracy, your president, who's the nice guy, the one that beat the not so nice guy, he watched his other friend, Mr. Nice Guy, in Russia, sending tanks down the main street of the main city of the country in order to dislodge people who were elected, whether he liked them or not, and blow up the building in which the people were supposed to sit to take democratic decisions. And everybody said, well, it's not nice, but it's to preserve democracy. Where are we going with this work? We can all see it on the other side. It comes down to us too. I know how hard it is to fall in behind the yellow banner on the St. Patrick's Day March. Nobody said it was easy. It's called democracy. Nobody said that it would do your cause a world of good to be seen supporting the Yellow March on St. Patrick's Day, given the difficulties and the prejudices. It's not supposed to be easy. It's a question of making decisions where you make alliances. You keep your head down on the parade in case you make it hard to get prisoners out of prison because you want to make alliances with people who know the president or know somebody else, and therefore of necessity you have to keep your head down much as you'd like to be seen with Anne Maguire. You've made your decision. You've already taken one step back from the road to freedom, whether you know it or not. If you find yourself saying, well, look, we all worked for Joe Doherty, and we supported Joe Doherty, and we put a lot of work into the Joe Doherty campaign, but really, Leonard Peltier isn't our business, and we don't want to confuse the Irish issue again. And you can't blame anybody for it but yourself. There is a point where we have got to make our own decisions. If we had been making our own coalitions and our own alliances 10 years ago, we'd be that much further down the road. They're being made by our enemies. We have the EEC, the bringing together of the economic community of Europe. We have the New World Order. We have the United Nations being reduced to being a puppet of the United States. And in this city alone, the oppressed can't get their act together to march on the road to freedom. It's time we stop feeling sorry for ourselves. It's time we stop thinking that sooner or later the amorphous solidarity, which means when I'm having a march you have to come on it, has got to be stopped. We have got to start organising, we have got to start analysing, and we have got to start realising if we don't make our links across our individual repressions against the system that oppresses us, we are going nowhere. I don't know if I live to see freedom. I actually, at this stage, don't care. Because I could walk out of here and be run over by a bus. The roof could fall in. Even though I've stopped smoking, I could take a heart attack and keel over. And then it wouldn't matter to me at all. You just have to carry me out and say nice things about me when I was dead. Actually, it's not that important, because individual freedom is just being on that road. Individual fulfillment is just being on that road. Being able to get up in the morning and look at yourself and knowing that you are part of a revolution. It only starts. Solid, so that we don't get beaten back in every generation. We have got to learn from the experience of the past and build the alliances of the future. I think it's time that the Irish movement in this country stopped chasing the invisible 43.5 million Irish Americans who are out there, and started recognizing who their friends are and build their alliances in the human rights, radical and oppressed communities of this nation.
I declare this a teach-in, and we'll stay as long as we want to stay, but I do understand that some of you have to leave, so as you do, please go quiet in. We thank you for your solidarity, for your patience, and we say to you, in the words that Derek Bell quoted from Justice Thurgood Marshall, dissent from apathy